Good afternoon. Thank you all very much for joining us. My name is Kathleen Krostick. I am the Partnerships Manager at Towson University. Thank you for joining us for today's B2 webinar, a conversation with the T. Rowe Price Foundation. Joining us for today is John Brothers, the President of the T. Rowe Price Foundation and President of the T. Rowe Price Charitable. Sabrina Thornton, the Program Officer for Arts and Culture at the T. Rowe Price Foundation. And Melanie Kelleher, the Director of Corporate Relations at Towson University. John, Sabrina, and Melanie will be discussing the impact of COVID-19 on corporate giving, T. Rowe Price's response on the crisis, and how corporate philanthropy will change in light of these challenging times. Before we jump in, just a few logistics about today's call. All of the attendees' videos will be off and you will be muted. However, we would still love to hear from you. So if you have any questions throughout the discussion, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A section. We'll be getting to them at the end of the presentation. Additionally, the chat function is enabled. So if you'd like to share anything either with all of the attendees or with the panelists, please feel free to enter it there. And lastly, we will be recording today's session and sharing it afterwards. So if you find it useful, which we hope you do, please share it along. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Melanie to get started.
Thank you, Kathleen, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the latest installment of BTU's webinar series. We're excited to have John and Sabrina from the T. Rowe Price Foundation as today's guests. At Towson University, we know that partnerships are key in helping to support our mission, to enhance student learning experiences, and to create positive impacts in our community. And we're honored to have the T. Rowe Price Foundation as one of our corporate partners and are thankful of their support of our students and programs. Before we jump into the discussion, John will be kicking us off with an overview of the T. Rowe Price Foundation and its strategic approach to giving. John, I'm going to let you kick that off.
Great. I know we have some slides, so we'll get those on the screen. But first, I want to say, how thankful both, I'll speak for myself, but I know I speak for Sabrina about how fortunate we are to have the long-term partnership with Towson. We are excited about the work that we do in community, and we could not do that work if we didn't lock arms with a variety of partners, but including Towson University. And so thank you all so much for joining us today. I'll give you a little bit of a nickel tour, so to say, of kind of T. Rowe Price's work and how we approach our work in community. And so the first slide is really just a really quick kind of understanding of how the foundation has started, but largely we began formally as a foundation in 1981, although we've been doing charitable giving for most of T. Rowe Price's long history. And our goal is, and our mission is to pursue the success of our communities where our associates live and work. And we want to make sure that our communities are thriving just like we are aiming to make sure that our clients are thriving. We really do encourage our associates to give back in community. We have an amazing matching gift program that we're really proud of. And but the foundation largely it does a variety of different methods of supporting community. But one of the biggest ways that we're known for is direct financial giving. And so we give largely in three bucket areas: empowering youth, which is led by our program officer, Stacy Van Horn; achieving innovation and creativity, which is led by Sabrina, who will be joining today; and then achieving financial well-being, which is an area that I lead for the firm. And again, we're really proud of our matching gift program. The foundation matches dollar for dollar for different types of associates up to different levels for our associates, but we're really proud of that program. And we're also proud that the foundation in both 2018 and 2019 was recognized as Baltimore's largest corporate philanthropy. So like the work that we do with our clients, we really do work hard to ensure that we have the trust of the communities that we work in. And so I came to the foundation in 2015, right against the backdrop of the unrest. And as a philanthropy since that time, have been really working to create infrastructure to endear us closely with community and be led by community. And so done a number of different things in terms of thinking about how do we do impact giving. And so we're proud of the work that we've done both in West Baltimore, but citywide around specific strands of how to have impact in community. But what you'll see here is there's a national movement around trust-based philanthropy. Rowe Price Foundation is part of that national movement to try to ensure that philanthropy is instilling trust-based principles in how we interact with community. And so, there you'll see a couple of bullets in each of them about how we instill those values in the way that we approach work. But anyone that's tried to raise dollars know that the first one, which is multi-year unrestricted funding, we, for the most part, provide general operating support and are moving in the direction of ensuring that a majority of our grants are multi-year. We don't put the impetus on organizations and community to have to prove to us. We do our homework on community so that when we walk into the room and walk into neighborhoods, that we are knowledgeable about both those organizations and what the neighborhoods and organizations that represent them are all about. Our application, anyone that's ever applied, it's a really simple process. Most folks would say, I think we've gotten feedback that our application questions are really community minded and geared on the idea of furthering a relationship as compared to having groups list a ton of information that ultimately is not super helpful to developing relationships. We're unbelievably transparent and responsive. We are in community. All of both Sabrina, myself, and Stacy, with all of our grantees, are meeting with them a couple of times a year. But also part of our work is to get feedback from our grantees and our wider community. And so we're consistently eliciting feedback. And then finally, if you only came to T. Rowe Price with the idea of getting a grant, you'd be missing out on what a global company could provide to a community at the local level. And so for us, Sabrina leads this effort for us, but one of the ways in which we try to help out in community outside of our grant making is our capacity building program, for which several hundred organizations over the last couple of years have participated in our capacity building program. We know the nonprofit sector in the Baltimore region for sure, but in other areas where we have offices is really weak. And for us, we need our nonprofit sector to be stronger so that the outcomes on the ground could be stronger. I'm going to not spend a ton of time on the next couple of slides, but it's just to basically give you all, and I think Melanie, these slides are available to folks if they need them later. But ultimately, we're trying to do, most corporate philanthropy is what you call a confetti style of funding, where you might have $101 bills and you'd stretch them far and wide to try to be a good citizen in community. And we definitely want to be a good citizen, but we also want to change and have impact in community, some of the challenges that community has. And we want to do it in a way that community is leading us rather than us leading community. And so we have several strategies that we've put into place. The biggest one is to make sure that we're using all of the different sections of a company coordinated or concentrated, as you see here, in a way that can benefit community. And for us, we're trying to balance citizenship and an impact. We want to have good bedside manner in community. We want to be a great collaborator, bringing folks together. We want what we call shared value, which is using other sections of a global company like T. Rowe to benefit community. And we want to be really good, have good operations in doing that. And then here's just a couple of examples I've highlighted in the kind of turquoise. I don't know if that's the right color to call it, but I know there's a specific brand color for it. That ultimately lists what we've done during COVID, but in large part, here's many of the different areas that we've tried to have impact. I think, the couple of them that we're really proud of in terms of collaborative leadership, like bringing dozen or more partners together in a number of instances to benefit community. We believe that philanthropy's one of the best things we can do is seeing things from 10,000 feet above, and then seeing where the threads might be common amongst a multitude of different groups, and then trying to bring that together. And so we're really proud of the collaborations that we've done. We're proud of the way in which we do our work, not only general operating, but we know at any given point in time, myself, Sabrina, Stacy, and our team know community really well because we spend so much time on the neighborhood level. Next slide. So capacity building, I'm going to steal this from Sabrina just because, but unless Sabrina, you want to jump in and kind of map through this. I can let you have some thunder.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of thunder and then I'll give it back to you. Well, so John actually started the capacity building program before I arrived on staff in 2017. We started in 2016 with a few events that really focused on networking and large scale kind of symposium style learning and workshops. Since that year, we have really expanded the depth and the breadth of the programming to offer still some of those larger scale learnings where folks are together in a room, kind of taking a deep dive into a subject matter together. But then we also do cohort style learnings where peers are coming together across different areas, learning from each other, talking through challenges and coming up with sort of group, a model of a group solution, working together where we're not doing a lot of the sort of teaching or consultants aren't doing teaching. We're more facilitating that learning. And then we also do, obviously, webinars are something that we're leaning into really heavily now. But we're sort of expanding. And the thing that I think I'm most proud of with our capacity building program, especially lately, is how nimble it is. So we obviously had plans for a number of in-person events and opportunities for folks to gather together for the rest of 2020 and pivoted very quickly and became very responsive to the needs of the moment. And we can, extend further into that with the rest of our discussion around COVID-19. But being able to be immediately responsive to what people were saying they needed for this specific moment in time. And we're really proud of our ability to do that with our capacity building work.
So the next page, all of these are eight of a number of stories that we're really proud of in terms of the impact that we're having at the local level. And again, it points to the shift from being citizenship funding to really trying to find nooks and crannies in community where we can be really helpful. And so, if you're looking at the top left, when we were sitting in the basements of churches or sitting in the living rooms of residents in West Baltimore, kind of listening from their perspective, what was the most important thing. Time and time again, what we heard is that the number one issue in West Baltimore from residents one of them was at least access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so we developed a collaboration led by the No Boundaries Coalition to try to ensure that residents could get access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so there's a thing called a healthy food indicator index that shows kind of how much healthy food is available to residents in specific neighborhoods. And in West Baltimore, before this initiative, they were one of the worst indexes in the city. We were able to kind of build this coalition, and they are able to get fresh fruits and vegetables to residents 6 of 7 days of the week, also as part of a sustainability model to raise dollars for them. And now their health food availability index score is much higher. They're in the middle to approaching the top tier. And so we're really proud of that work, also because it's owned by that community, and they no longer need our resource to be able to do that. Elevation Awards right underneath that is an example of, in West Baltimore, there were folks that said, hey, I have ideas on how to change my community, yet I don't have access to social capital or financial capital to be able to take my idea and move it to the next level. And so we created Elevation Awards, which is an effort to ensure that entrepreneurs and innovators of color have access to social and financial capital to take their ideas to the next level. They're now in their 4th year. Many of those winners have gone on to win national awards. And so they have done the work, but we're proud that we were able to help kind of bring them to light. Right next to that is Design Fest. I won't go through all of these, but Design Fest, which Sabrina has been mightily leading over the last couple of years, is a way to use the amazing creators and innovators and designers in the Baltimore area, along with some at Rowe Price, to help create websites and logos and things for nonprofits that largely nonprofits can't do because they need to spend their dollars on services. And so one of the things we noticed in the data that we keep is that Baltimore nonprofits are not as strong as they could be at telling their story. And we wanted to give a way to be able to create new websites and logos and just the front face of some of these amazing nonprofits. The last one I'll highlight is the bottom to the right is called Civic Innovators. We also realize, that the Baltimore city government is a huge part of our social safety net, and we need city government to be strong. And for us, one of the things that we notice around companies is that companies do have good infrastructure. And how do we use that infrastructure of companies to help the city have strong infrastructure? So we created this thing called Civic Innovators, which is built on the idea of companies using their corporate talent around very specific areas to help build the capacity of municipal government in very specific places. Our first pilot project was with the Baltimore Police Department, helping their fleet management issues. That's why you see police cars. And ultimately, that initiative went off great. We saved the city millions of dollars, and we're able to get our associates and there were 14 companies that we have pulled together on this initiative. All of those companies were able to use their talent to help the city get to the next level. Next slide. So, this is just an example. Every year we partner with the Center for, or every 3 years we partner with the Center for Effective Philanthropy. We use their model to grab feedback from our network, not only our grantees, but anyone that's come into contact with us to let us know, how are we doing? What are we up to? What do you like? What do you don't like? What does our bedside manner look like? And we're proud that, one, we have really good feedback loops and accountability partners that let us know when we're not doing what we should be doing as well as we could be. And we're proud from that feedback that we're able to every year iterate and get better and better at the work that we do. And I think the last slide just really points to, for us, and we think it's important for nonprofits in the city, and this relates to some of the capacity building work that we're doing, is, if our nonprofit sector or our charitable sector in Baltimore or other areas that we come in contact with, but because we'll talk about Baltimore because of where we are, if our nonprofit sector doesn't get better or stronger, we're in for a world of hurt. It's a really extreme way to say it. I'm sorry, but we have, before COVID, 1 in 10 nonprofits are technically insolvent, and over 40% of nonprofits in our region have less than have a 0 to negative net income margin. And that's before COVID. And if, so we've been doing a lot of work with our grantees about what's happened historically as a result of things like pandemics or economic challenges. And, with the last Great Recession as our latest indicator, we're really worried about, typically nonprofits follow see challenges 6 months after the for-profit sector. And so we're worried about the fall and what that will bring to the nonprofit sector. So that's why we spend so much time on capacity building. That's why our bedside banner is really trying to make sure that we're helping nonprofits, not only with money for sure, but in other ways that we can be helpful. Because I think if our neighborhoods have strong nonprofits, then we can be assured that we're going to have better outcomes in community. So I'll end there and give it back to you, Melanie.
Thanks, John. The strategy you just discussed looks like it enabled the foundation to quickly pivot to address the needs of your grantees and their communities during these unusual times. So just to kind of start off generally, what has COVID-19 meant for the T. Rowe Price Foundation, and what has it meant for the organizations that you work with?
Sure. So I'll start, and then I know Sabrina has been leading a really exciting effort around thinking about the creative and artist community, and we've definitely put some resources into that area for sure. I think what I'm proud of is the infrastructure that we have built over the last couple of years has fared well for us in terms of meeting many of the challenges of our grantees and wider nonprofit community. I think, I alluded to the work that we did with the Baltimore Police Department. That work began actually right after the unrest, in which a couple local CEOs had said, why can't we get our company's social good efforts to work more closely together? And so T. Rowe Foundation led an effort to bring together, at that time it was 5, and now it's grown to 25 partners, to work together to collaborate and join corporate resources where it makes sense to do that. And so the Civic Innovators is one example that I alluded to, but another example is 13 companies actually have come together to contribute about almost $1.3 million to a very specific response in the city, making food insecurity and learning from the lessons of 2015, what we noticed is in Baltimore in 2015, a lot of responses on how to deal with what had happened. But also, I think as a city, we learned that we probably didn't coordinate in a number of ways as well as we should have. And so what we did is coordinated corporate resources around a very specific area. And some of the learnings that we learned from was, number one, making sure that our dollars got to organizations in neighborhoods who knew their residents by name, which is one of the critiques after the unrest. And so those dollars, what we're proud of is just released about $650,000 of that fund. Over 50% of the organizations had budgets of less than $250,000. Every target neighborhood, which are neighborhoods that have been disinvested, had at least 5 institutions that received funding for food insecurity, with 25 organizations in the Sandtown, Winchester, Harlem Park area receiving dollars. Over 50% of the organizations were led by a person of color. 20% were faith-based organizations, with a majority of the other organizations being 501c3s. So we learned a lot from 2015, and that helped us pivot. And this corporate structure that we developed a couple of years ago was able to immediately react and get dollars together and get it back out into community. So I'll stop there, and then I'll let Sabrina talk a little bit about the Artist Fund that we've been doing and some capacity building work that we've been doing.
Yeah, so I think that in the arts and culture space, we're trying to pay attention to a couple different factors here. Number one is in the area of individual artists. These are folks who, can no longer do their work, their artwork, because events have been shut down. They're no longer able to do shows and performances. But then also a lot of the individual artist population that we see makes their supplemental income by way of the service industry. And all of those jobs have been sort of put on hold, or at least mitigated for a while. And so another layer added onto that is many individual artists, because of the way they file their taxes or income levels, there are many different factors. They weren't on the threshold of qualifying for some of the state and federal relief packages that were being released. And so I was on a call with Maryland Philanthropy Network, and a number of members of our local artist community built sort of a coalition around building an artist relief fund that was sort of headed up under BOPA, Baltimore Office of Promotion of the Arts, but it was spearheaded by a number of local groups, MICA's BCAN effort, GBCA, Maryland Citizens for the Arts, among many others. And they sort of put this fund, this Baltimore Emergency Artist Relief Fund, off the ground in a number of days after the state had announced the shutdown. And we felt it really important, to commit a significant portion of the funding to that effort, to that fund, because we are one of the only, there's only a handful of art-specific funders in the city of Baltimore. And we are proud to be a member of that community, but then also knowing sort of all of these factors that are weighing on individual artists, making it harder for them to have relief. And so we were one of the first to commit to that grant making, that fund, that relief fund. And then also on the organizational level, something I'm really trying to pay attention to and be cognizant of is that for performing arts organizations in particular, or any arts or cultural institution that relies very heavily on earned income by way of ticket sales, concessions, all the things that require people to be in your building in large numbers. These are organizations that are suffering particularly during this moment. I think Americans for the Arts just released some nationwide numbers to the tune of $5.5 billion in losses so far. And so, and that's nationwide. But, think of Maryland as a piece of that. Think of Baltimore as a piece of that. We're seeing extreme losses in the arts and culture community. And namely, the arts and culture community on the organizational level are the last to really climb back from a crisis like this. And they're hit particularly hard. And when focuses on food security and human needs, that gets put on the back burner. And so as an arts and culture funder, we're having to kind of shift and focus and figure out where we can be the most supportive for our organizations during this time, For some folks, that might mean encouraging partnership, encouraging collaboration. For some folks, that might mean rethinking the business model and doing some different scenario planning, which we're offering in our capacity building offerings. But it's really hitting the arts and culture community hard, and we're trying to be as responsive as we can to those folks during this time.
Thanks, Sabrina. And speaking of being responsive, one of the things that has stood out is the fact that Rowe Price was one of the first corporations in the region to come forward with grant funding for those combating COVID-19. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you were able to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you guys came out on the 20th of March. So very soon after schools closed, you were able to start with funding the first immediate needs. And what immediate needs were first identified? So first, the question is, how were you able to respond so quickly? And what were the first immediate needs that you guys focused on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one, I think in order to respond quickly, that ultimately, and to do that well, that ultimately is rooted in really good partnerships and really good information on the ground. And so I think one is because we had already been doing years of work in coordinating other companies and working with other companies and meeting quarterly with all of those companies. It was fairly easy to kind of issue the clarion call for other groups to come together and think about what we could do. And so that came together quickly. We also, because we've had such great relationships in neighborhoods and had been working for years on knowing who the critical and key people in those neighborhoods were, that also allowed us in the same way to really be able to get our ear to the ground really quickly on what people were saying. And quite at the time, and still is, what I'm really proud of is in Baltimore, we haven't had, we have a good network of folks that are trying to put food on the table of our most vulnerable citizens. And I think we're proud to be part of that network. And I think us getting out in front quickly and earlier and being able to partner and continue to partner and build partnerships only was able to do that because we've been doing it for years and setting the framework to do that for years. So we're proud of that, and we think the work is gotten to the places that it needs to in a way that ensures that equity is met, that folks in those neighborhoods that know the young people and their families by name can ensure that those people get the food and things that they need.
I would also just add that internally we do have some infrastructure set up around disaster philanthropy. We have a disaster philanthropy work group inside Rowe Price, which contains members of the Rowe Price Foundation, but also members from our corporate responsibility team. And we really partner together and try to look at each instance from multiple angles. So obviously the foundation is looking at things in terms of grant making and some immediate impact, some long-term impact. We rely heavily on the Center for Disaster Philanthropy to inform a lot of our decision making in this space. But then also we rely really heavily on our corporate responsibility team at Rowe Price because they are super connected to all of our regional and global offices in ways that we can make sure that our response obviously is going to be heavily centered on Baltimore because we are based in Baltimore, we're headquartered in Baltimore. That is our home community. But we also want to be responsive to the fact that we have associates all over the globe. And it's important that our efforts in disaster relief and all of our philanthropy, frankly, reflect those associates and their footprint across the world. And obviously, as this is a global, pandemic, it stretched the abilities of that work group even more. And then also on the capacity building end, I would say that, we were in communication with organizations on an individual level in the very, very early days of all of this happening. Some of the first things that we heard bubbling up was kind of the emotional weight and the mental stress that folks were under, making really difficult decisions around furloughs, around potential shutdowns of their organizations, knowing that folks were in just such a hard place. And so really the first thing that we did was focus on mental health with a consultant that we've come to know and love and trust, Shauna Marie Brown, providing weekly guided meditations and just a chance for folks who are literally, Meals on Wheels, Movable Feast, all these organizations that are serving our most vulnerable populations and really bearing the emotional weight of that during this time, making sure they had 45 minutes to an hour to take a breath. During the first couple of weeks of this crisis, we felt like that was the first step that we could take with regards to capacity building and providing that relief.
Great. So it sounds like for the immediate needs, you guys focused on food security and the mental health issues. As the crisis has continued, have you seen other needs arise? Have things changed? Have the needs of the organizations you've worked with shifted at all, or are those still the main concerns?
So what I would say is what we have noticed is a couple of things. One is, and where we've kind of locked in for over the last couple of months, and we'll continue to do so. Number one is we need strong organizations. We need our organizations in our communities to be to stay there and be strong in their work. We know that Baltimore has amazing organizations and the region has amazing organizations doing really amazing work. It's not going to benefit anybody if we can't have those organizations stay. And so that's why we've doubled down on capacity building. Sabrina talked about, the self-care of frontline workers and folks that are working through this is really important. As you can imagine, it's really hard to do this work. When you add the strains and stress of COVID on top of that, it just becomes a really heavy burden to bear. And so we really want to work on that. But we also are doing capacity building sessions and efforts with groups on financial management and cash flow management and scenario planning in a variety of areas to help organizations and their businesses run better. So I think one track that we'll remain on is that we need strong organizations in our communities. The second one is and this is one that we've been working on for a while, as well as strong organizations, is partnerships, right? Because I think unless we can really get organizations to lock arms well together, it's just not going to work. While more organizations is totally fine, more collaborated organizations is even better. And so, we've created before COVID a partnership fund. We've done a number of different things on how organizations partner together more effectively. In Baltimore, just using a data point, we have of the organizations dedicated to alleviating poverty in Baltimore, it's about a $1.7 billion a year nonprofit industry dedicated to that work. The question becomes, does that industry need to be 2 billion? Does it need to be 2.5 billion? Maybe. But what we do know is that 1.7 needs to be better collaborated across. And so we are consistently focused on making sure that organizations are working together. Sabrina and I see a lot of grant applications. That's part of our role. What we see in those grant applications is lots of people asking for the same things. And so if we can get folks to borrow sugar, which is the phrase that we use, then that's going to benefit everybody. And quite frankly, I think Sabrina and I think Sabrina would say, nonprofits, even though we hear the words collaboration and partnership all the time, are not actually really good at collaborating and partnering across budget lines. And so we need that to happen. And so those are two things that we did before COVID. We're going to do it during COVID, and we know we're going to do it after COVID. And we know that those are the two things that the sector is going to need during this crisis to do better and better.
And that actually is a great setup for my question about, so what's next for corporate philanthropy and the organizations that they support? Long term, how do you want organizations to be prepared? How do you want to have your interactions with them go?
Sabrina, you could start if that's cool.
Well, I think, for us, and this has actually always been the case for us, but even more so now, I think having really honest and candid conversations with funders is even more so important right now for organizations. There's no need to sweep things under the rug. Bring out all the dirty laundry now as you're digging through and doing some scenario planning and some cash flow projections, because I think some organizations would be surprised at how open funders are to having, well, not even how open, but how appreciative funders are to having really tough conversations, and knowing that organizations are digging deep and making hard decisions, even though they're hard, is actually a good sign. We just hosted a webinar yesterday with Spectrum Nonprofit Services around sort of the dual bottom line of how programs provide impact, but then also what the impact of those programs are on your financial bottom line as an organization. And I think looking at some of those things together, making some of those hard decisions, not only informing funders about them, but having kind of an open, collaborative conversation and discussion. Because as John mentioned earlier, we see a lot of grant applications. We talk to a lot of our organizations, and you never know when an open conversation can turn into a collaborative or a partnership or a merger or any of those possibilities that could help not only keep your organization surviving during a time like this, but ultimately sort of end up thriving on the other side. And so I would say just, more than ever, stay open and honest and have those hard discussions with your funders. Your funders want you to survive. They want you to make it through a time like this. And waiting until it's too late to have the conversation can be a lot worse than having it early on.
I mean, I think the only thing that I would add, and I'm looking at the questions that some of the people watching have listed, is that, again, I think for us, we always try to do our work at the neighborhood level, and then our expansion of our neighborhood work always comes from, if it succeeds on the ground, then we want to practice it in other places. So if we look at Elevation Awards, which we did in a very specific neighborhood, and there were 177 applications for 10 spots in West Baltimore. So we knew that that there was a need for this. As we've expanded this citywide, we've seen the application for this it quadruple. And so we know practicing this at the neighborhood level and opening it up to wider is typically how we go. One of the questions alludes to the idea of how can we get the work of faculty and program directors, how can we get either philanthropy to be interested to that? And what I would say, I was what they called a pracademic, right? I was a professor at NYU and at Rutgers, and then had a consulting firm that did the work. I know we're always interested in research to practice principles, the idea of the really good work that universities are doing on a variety of different subjects. If it touches or connects to the work that we're trying to do on the ground, we want to try to figure out a way to be able to do that. And so we have a number of long-term partnerships with universities. We, in fact, have a coalition of university heads of universities that are meeting with the mayor's office to try to figure out how could universities come together and use their resources more collectively to benefit community. Because what we found in our discussions with neighborhood leaders was that universities were kind of tripping over themselves, often multiple university efforts happening in communities that look the same, oftentimes grabbing data from neighborhoods but not doing it in the best way. And so was there a way that communities could use the research prowess of universities to benefit community based on what community needed rather than what they were suggesting was the opposite? And so we view our role in that as kind of bringing partners together, because we've had long-term relationships with universities already. And so for us, we're always interested in trying to partner with universities, with department heads, with other faculty, to try to figure out if they have research to practice efforts that could really play in neighborhoods in a really great way. We want to be a part of that.
As we're waiting for more questions to come in, just wanted to get your thoughts on that, about the good stories that have come out of this. At this time, there's been a lot of people coming together to support one another. What are some of the stories that stand out to you?
Well, I would
I'll
say,
start, John, if you don't mind.
Please do. Yeah, please. I love that.
Well, I just have a couple of favorites, just because, I have a lot of organizations in my arts and culture grant making portfolio that honestly, I was I guess not surprised, because I know they're all wonderful and amazing, but I was just really heartened at how quickly they pivoted to sort of meet the needs of the day. Specifically, organizations like Center Stage, the costume department sort of band together with, I think, costume departments of other organizations to make masks for local hospitals, that followed CDC guidelines. Then we had organizations like Made in Baltimore and OpenWorks coming together with networks of sort of 160 different partners up and down the Eastern Seaboard to create those plastic face shields for hospital workers using 3D printers. I know Young Audiences has been doing art making kits that students can pick up when they pick up their school meals at those pickup locations. So there's been just sort of a number of ways that organizations, I think, have not only sought to sort of make connections and forge new paths forward for themselves during this time, but to really serve sort of the hospital workers and other frontline folks who are facing some of the real obstacles of this crisis. And so that was particularly heartening for me to see.
So the one area I would point to, I mean, the beauty of the field that we've chosen to be in is that we are seeing amazing stories every day. I mean, that's just one of the benefits of being in this work, is that I mean, that's the fuel behind why, at least for me, and I know for sure for Sabrina, why we do this work, right? I wouldn't tell T. Rowe Price this. I mean, I would do this for free, right? It's just so amazing to be able to be up close to just really amazing folks on the ground level doing this work. And so the one I have been pointing to lately is, we partnered together with a couple of groups, Bloomberg, Philanthropy, and some others, to do youth-led videos on COVID from young people. And we're overwhelmed by the amount of young people, number one, that heard about this effort, came from not only in the Baltimore area, but just came from Pittsburgh and a bunch of different places, and submitted these like a really amazing videos on their experiences in COVID, giving advice to their fellow young people on what they should do, trying to lift each other up. I mean, the stories were amazing. Anyone who wouldn't tear up by seeing some of these videos, it was just powerful. And so I'm just fortunate enough to be up close to that each and every day. But that's one example I think that was really great.
We have one question that I think John has not completely addressed, and I'll share that. But in the meantime, while I do, if anybody wants to submit any questions, we'd love to hear from you. So this one last question. I really appreciate your time today. What are some of the future areas of focus for the foundation to focus on, specifically with the financial crisis, the recent pandemic, seeing how financial literacy skills are extremely valuable? How is the foundation carrying out these initiatives in the future?
Yeah, so I would say a couple of things. One is, I think the firm has for a while had a really great tools and resources. We have an effort through our corporate social responsibility team called Money Confident Kids, which is information and resources, games, things like that, to help young people work through and understand the world of finance. And we think those are really powerful tools that can continue to be there. I think for us, we also, before the pandemic, we literally 2 weeks before opened up a thing called the Be More CoLab, which was a place for financially focused nonprofits like Kiva or Maryland Cash Campaign and a couple of others, Innovation Works, to be housed under one roof. It used to be a former, what we called the Investor Center at T. Rowe. There was a time when people, when they did their investments, did them on paper and brought them in. Now they don't need that so much, but we have these centers. And so we converted that center into a place where we are housing 5 nonprofits to work on financial empowerment for the city of Baltimore. And so anybody that has a small business, a social entrepreneurship center, or anything like that can come there and do that work. Our impact grants are focused on this. We have a partnership with the folks at Dovecote and some others working on Black home ownership. We have another effort with a group called the Neighborhood Financial Trust. It's based out of New York City. We're here working in Baltimore, that has this amazing tool. Most people now, what we've learned through data on financial literacy is, if you want to talk about finances, no one wants to sit in front of somebody and say, why are their finances not in order? It's like when, working out, like you don't want to have somebody stretching you out. You'd rather do it through an app, right? And so they have this amazing app that can plug into existing case management that can actually help folks go through their credit score, come up with a game plan. They have a financial counselor on the other side that they're connecting with, that's texting them and getting them there. And it's just an amazing tool that has been now in Baltimore for over a year, and has elicited amazing results. People's credit scores have dropped, they're saving more money, things like that. And it's just a new wave of how you think about financial literacy and financial coaching. But also we want to do it in a way that wasn't intrusive and challenging. And so we have found this to be a really good plug and play for people that are already connecting with folks going through this, that they can now use this tool as part of their work to help them get to the next level.
Yeah, and I would just add on the capacity building end in terms of sort of financial literacy. John mentioned Design Fest earlier, which is an event that we host every year in partnership with MICA, which provides T. Rowe Price associates specifically in the sort of graphic design space an opportunity to connect one-on-one with organizations and do some of this design work that's kind of outside of their 9-to-5 workday. I think we're interested in exploring something like that in the financial space. Obviously, we have the expertise at T. Rowe Price. I think the apparatus or the formula of what that would look like, especially in the virtual space, kind of has yet to be figured out. But I know that we're really interested in figuring that out and being able to provide resources like that in the future.
Okay, we haven't had any other questions come in. So unless anyone on the panel would like to add something, we can go ahead and wrap it up.
No, the only thing I would say, and we say this to everybody, is, we view ourselves not only partners with great organizations like Towson, but also the people that come under the Towson umbrella. And so because we are community focused and because you represent faculty and program directors and a number of folks that are also doing really good work in community, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at any given point in time, as you are walking in the same footpaths as we are many times. And so we definitely look at ourselves as willing partners to academics, to folks within university systems, to try to make the communities that we live and work in a better place to be. So happy to always be connecting with anybody that's interested in that.
Thanks, John. We really appreciate it because we really do value our relationship with you all. John and Sabrina, on behalf of Towson University, the Division of Sponsored Projects and Applied Research, and the BTU and advancement teams, thank you for joining us today. And thank you to the T. Rowe Price Foundation for all the organization does for the greater Baltimore community. It's great to have you guys here and see you leading the charge during this time of crisis and during normal times as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And for everyone
Thank
that today's discussion, stay tuned. BTU will be offering more webinars in the upcoming weeks on the strategies and best practices for staying connected to your partners and the communities you serve. Thank you for being here and have a wonderful day.